Everybody, and a very, very good morning from Singapore. It's an absolute pleasure to be part of the Dive In Fest, and welcome to our webinar on the future of work. My name is Anita Kapoor, and I am a facilitator, an MC, and a speaker, and I have very specific interests and advocacies in equality, inclusivity, and diversity, and I'm super, super thrilled to be part of this particular webinar. As you know, the title is The Future of Work, Diversity and Inclusion Now More Important Than Ever. I know that we still have people streaming in, but not to worry. We will begin this conversation anyway, and join us as you can. It's going to be super robust. I have an amazing panel. We're going to talk for about 40 minutes. And we'll take Q&A for about 10 to 15 minutes. Maybe they'll give us a little bit more time, who knows. And we'll also be sending out a couple of polls to get a bit of a baseline of how you're feeling and what you really want from the future of work. And if we could send out that first poll now, and I will set up the conversation. And I also just want to remind everybody to get into that grid view as well, so that you can see everybody. And it's really kind of the best view in the house. So here we go. I'm going to do the same thing because I can't see all my beautiful panel otherwise. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Hi. They're all muted.
Good morning, Anita.
Hi, everyone. Okay, I'm just going to set up the conversation, and then I'm going to ask each of you to do a quick introduction of yourselves. So if you could just mute yourself for the moment while I yabber on and just set the scene, okay? And of course, that poll has just come out, so please feel free, and the poll will close as we finish the actual introduction. I think that we're all very well aware that diversity and inclusion is critical. I mean, it's the foundation that all companies should really be built on. And they should develop it and they should advance it as well. But it has become more critical as this time has developed itself, that it's a source of empowerment and sustainability for leadership, culture, teams, community, and as we all navigate this global crisis together, and it's the same timeline. You know, in our modern history, we have not had this opportunity to be on the same timeline, so that's something to think about. And I think it's really the companies that listen, the companies that unlearn, relearn, champion, practice, and evolve diversity and inclusion at every level. And across this newly distributed workforce, which we're going to be talking about in just a few short moments, and via the challenges of this virtual communication, these blurred work-life boundaries, and who also accept the emotional impact of crisis. I think it's the companies who value, respect, and accept their workforce as individuals who are going to be able to chart this next normal with wisdom, with resilience, creativity, collaboration, innovation, and propel themselves through and forward. Now, with that introduction, that's what my panel this morning are going to be discussing. And I would invite everyone to unmute themselves and to say a really, really great good morning to Moira, James, Mark, and Sachin. How is everybody? If I may ask each and every one of you to please introduce yourselves one by one, and starting with Moira.
Thank you, Anita. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name's Moira Roberts, and I look after APAC and HR for Munich Re, and I'm fairly new to the insurance industry, 3 years in. Thank you.
Mark, would you like to go next?
Hi, Mark Albus. I'm a global partner of Arcadia Consulting. We call ourselves Architects of Change. So we work with the world's best companies and people such as yourself around leadership, mindset, and overall communication. And so I have a pleasure of running many of the inclusive leadership programs across Asia Pacific. So lovely to join you today.
Thank you. What time is it where you are, Mark?
I'm in Italy. It is just gone 4:15 a.m. So up and bright and shiny.
And sharply dressed at 3 a.m. I take my hats off to you. Below this table, it's pajamas, I got to tell you.
You don't know what I'm wearing underneath. Exactly.
Sachin.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and be part of this panel. I'm really looking forward to participating in it today. I am a general manager for Manulife's emerging markets in Asia. Manulife is, I think, a well-known Canadian life insurance company. And again, a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And James.
Good morning, everyone. I'm the CEO and the Principal Officer for Munich Re Singapore. As a Korean heritage Australian, I'm proudly living in Singapore with my wife and 2 daughters, and I'm very humbled to be part of this panel today, and looking forward to a very engaging discussion and also to learn from this experience as on the journey for diversity and inclusion. Morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I'm just going to, the poll has actually ended, everyone, and I'm just looking for my results. Hey, here we go. And I think we can all see the results. I can't see that first question. If my wonderful WebEx producer could actually show me that first question, that would be great. Okay, I think the first question was, how often would you like to work from home in the future? 50-50. Hey, this is great because this is kind of what we've been talking about. And how have you found the engagement from your employer since the new working environment? More and same, less. So we've got same, we've got a little bit more, and we've got a little bit less. So let's just bear that in mind as we actually enter into this conversation. I think that it's actually very gratifying to see some of these, and so we kind of know where our work is as well and how we actually begin. Okay, let's move into our very first question. Key takeaways, COVID-19 has happened, how it has actually affected you and your own future of work. I'd like to begin with Sachin, and I know that you took on a new role at Manulife during the heart of the pandemic.
That's right, Anita, and I have to tell you, this was quite an insightful process for me, both from a personal perspective, but also in terms of the company I joined, Manulife, and what the whole process said about the company itself. And this is going to sound very weird. I have yet to meet in person the people I work for. They're in Hong Kong or in Toronto, and the whole process was done virtually. Early mornings, late nights, middle of the day, using technology. But I have to tell you, I was also fortunate where I'd been talking to some other companies during the same time, and several other companies got stuck in the process where they felt like, okay, we've got to find a way. We think this is going to be over, and maybe you can come see us in June and we can meet in person. Some companies struggled to transition from telephone to video. And for me, it was a real insight into culture of the company, and particularly one that leaned me heavily towards Manulife, because this was a company that was about getting on with it. Okay, this is the way it's going to work. We're not trying to figure out how long the pandemic's going to be around. We're just going to embrace this is the way we've got to operate and make it work. And it said a lot about the implicit trust they were placing not only in the process and technology, but in the human interaction. And bringing in somebody in my capacity, in essence, sight unseen, as they say, and through a lot of virtual conversations, it really spoke to the culture of the company, being open, being inclusive, having this warmth and implied trust sitting underneath it in terms of the interactions. And it's been an exceptional first couple of months, I think, as a result of that, because everything I saw on the way in really is the foundation of the company's culture, and I think has really created a strong platform for how the company has been managing through, and how we and our associates all over Asia have been managing through this pandemic quite well, in fact, and certainly better than many of our peers in terms of our performance. So a real personal experience to go through this, but also very insightful in seeing how other companies were maybe not managing this as well as I think Manulife has been managing it.
Yeah, that's really interesting what you've said. I've written down the words tech and trust and humans. And it's quite interesting when we remove the barriers of the typical trust or the spaces that we feel trusting of, some other kind of magic does happen. I know there's a flip side to it, but we'll just hold with that point at the moment. I'm going to move to Mark. Mark went off to get married and has now been in Italy since your wedding day, because you can't actually come back. What's this experience been for you?
Yeah, thanks very much, Anita. So yeah, really personally, my biggest takeaway is just stay in the flow. So you kind of just got to go with the waves around this. My husband and I came to Scotland originally to get married because we could legally do it there. And then my visa expired. So now I'm camping out in Italy until I can get my application through to get back to Singapore. And so it's been very much this idea of that, this situation has caused so much upheaval in so many people's lives, and being able to just really go with the flow and support people through that process. So it leads me to my second biggest takeaway, which is digital empathy, is that I couldn't have believed that we could do what we do digitally. And I am absolutely overwhelmed by how much rapport you can build, how people seem to drop their barriers, how the fact that we're not in the office in many ways, people are allowing us glimpses into their home and seeing their children and their lives. And it's just allowing us to connect in ways that we wouldn't have had when we had all the power dynamics in place. And so my key takeaway has just been, and to echo Sachin, this building of community across people that you wouldn't normally necessarily connect with in new ways. And so for me, it's been a very positive side effect of COVID-19.
Yeah, it's a real work-life balance in every sense of the word. Thank you so much, Mark. Moira, what about you?
Thanks, Anita. I think for me, it's around technology. So technology has been a huge enabler for us, but communication and humanity is the key. So I think we can use technology, and we clearly all are, and Mark talked about that, but actually we still need that humanness and that connectivity, and communication becomes even more important. I think from an industry perspective, and if I look at the insurance industry, I think the pandemic on the positive side has given us much freedom, and I think it's propelled us into action and doing things a lot faster than we would have ever been able to. So that to me is a massive positive, I think, out of the pandemic, particularly for us as a pretty traditional industry. So the whole conversations we were having as organisations around flexible work and remote working and hours of work and styles of work, the whole conversation's been propelled completely forward. And I think that's a massive piece for us, I think, as an organisation, as an industry. Personally, I would say it's probably around being humble. It's been some pretty difficult times, given the nature of the work that I do. We had some really amazing highs, but we've also had some really amazing lows. And for me personally, I think it's about holding it all together, when it gets tough, and really showing our resilience, but also showing that we're human. This has been tough for everybody.
Absolutely. And I think the very first place that we actually show that we're human is in our varied backdrops. We have, moments into our lives, and we have kids running through those moments. And, I really love everything that all of you have said. And I am going to come to James as well. I've heard the words empathy. I've heard the words humble. I've heard the words humanity, and I heard the words human. And I think that's where we've all been sort of brought to, kind of brought to front and center to face these things, because perhaps these are the things that we're really missing from our work and our lives before. James.
Yeah, thank you, Anita. So yeah, I will definitely echo Sachin, Mark, and Moira here. But for me, thankfully, FI industry has been, financial industry, in particular, reinsurance and the insurance industry have been very solid throughout this period. So I'd like to sort of thank on behalf of the industry for everyone's professionalism and the integrity to keep the industry up. So I think that's a big plus. And in my recent exchange with MAS, they also commented that FI industry remains rather strong at the moment, which is a very good news for us, and we need to keep it at that level. So in that sense, I echo Sachin as well. For me, just to say, I think it's what I've come to realize is the importance of connection, and ultimately that it's easy to get bogged down behind a screen, but we are in people business at the end of the day. And I think that's been a big highlight for me. On a personal level, to have lunch and dinner with the kids on the weekdays hasn't been done in the last decade, and it happened in the last 9 months, and I come to appreciate how valuable those times are. But no, that's my takeaway for me.
That's fantastic. I mean, I'm just going to throw myself into this and say that for me, it was crisis equals creativity. And on a personal level, I think just seeing the rise in the openness towards identifying emotional health, it's been, and understanding it and strategies for that as well has been really gratifying. And of course, the visibility, of our humanness and our imperfectness, I think is deeply empowering. I'm just going to move on to our very next question. Is you think that we're ever going to go back to work as before COVID? And do we even need to? I'm going to start with you, Mark.
Thanks. I think it's going to look very, very different. And I think that we will be using at least 50% of our time by communicating digitally. So many people are seeing the benefits of this. And from an inclusiveness perspective, you know, people are telling me how much they love the fact that the power dynamics are gone. So everyone's tiles the same size on a Zoom call or a WebEx call. And so people who didn't necessarily have a voice are feeling like they have more of a metaphorical seat at the table, if you will. So I think a lot of people are going to want to hold on to that and want to be able to collaborate in digital ways. I know, though, that, you know, there are people who are really struggling and wanting to have that face-to-face contact. So I think most organizations are going to have to move to some type of flexible arrangement or some type of guidance as we discover what the best way is. I know we were chatting, Moira and I, the other day around, you know, how much is enough and how much isn't enough, and some of the studies are coming out there. So I don't think we know yet. I think it's going to be a bit of an experiment in the foreseeable future, but I would see that there's some combination of whereby we do about 50% of our work digitally and 50% of our work at home, and that's just my gut feel on it, and I think my personal preference at this stage.
Moira, I know that this is something that you actually, when we had our little pre-chats, you were talking about what's the perfect amount of days, and is it supposed to be 1.5 days at home?
So there's a study out from Google, and it was pre-pandemic, and they were saying that it was 1.5 days. And at the moment, I think a lot of organisations are grappling, trying to work out what it means for them. And how many days seems right, just the same as we're doing, I think, within this survey. But some of the best data that I can get is out of Google, and clearly, you know, massive tech industry ahead of the game, I think, in terms of flexible work. So I think that 1.5 days does have a bit of meaning. But for me, I think it's also about the nature of the work that you do and how much time you need that face-to-face connect time. We're also talking in our organisation at the moment around different levels in terms of where you are with your career. So do you need more touch points in the early parts of your career where you really need that hands-on get together with your managers and your peers and your co-workers so that you can really learn from one another. So for us, it's also about the nature and the type of work that you do. But I think, like everybody else and like the poll, we're probably going to end up with 4 days at home or 4 days in the office, 1 day at home, 2 or 3. I think there'll be variations. I think for us, the real issue is let's not get caught up in how long. I think it's what works for all of us and what is right for all of us from an organisational and personal perspective.
Absolutely, I agree. And, you know, we are talking about inclusivity and diversity, and people really are living in very diverse homes, cultures, attitudes, and all of these things now have really come to the fore, where before, when you just came to the office, all of this was just, you know, you're blind to it. You come to the office, you have a great environment, and that's it. But now we are so much more aware, and we have so much more information. And actually, I think that's a great thing, because now it allows us to develop our policies and our rhythms and our communities in a much more inclusive way.
Agreed. And if you look at the way that we've been working in a traditional office environment for such a long time, it is actually outdated. It really has enabled us, I think, to look at the sort of static nature of the office environment that we've all been working in and say, wow, how come we haven't changed this before? Or how come we haven't changed it as much as we can now possibly change it? So I think the possibilities are endless. It's about what works for us as individuals, as organisations, based on what we do and how we do it. But lots of great conversations going on, which I think is the most exciting piece of this.
Yeah, absolutely. James, I remember you saying to me in our pre-conversation that for you, one of the things that really stood out for you is the empowering of the softer voice. And that's what really stood out for you. Could you just expand on that a little more, please?
Yeah, absolutely. But before I do, I just want to say I hope that we don't go back. It's a progressive thing, and sometimes it shows you the extreme changes it needs to bring some more balance. And I think this is sort of the change that we're talking about, diversity as well. I mean, if you just look at from a gender perspective, we do need some extreme moves here to bring some balance into this topic as well. And I think the ship has left the port, the bus stop. I'm not going to say planes now. We will not go back pre-COVID, right? I think we will move on to the next level, which is efficiency and flexibility. But as to the question that we discussed before about the empowering of soft voices, for me, playing with the word inclusion, to me, the definition of inclusion is to get the softer voices to be heard, to be meaningful. And I think here, what I would say is everyone has a part to play here. In particular, managers, team leads, not just the executive senior managers, right? Because to me, it's when the person, the individuals you've knowingly or unknowingly excluded, if they start to feel included and those voices are heard in the smaller team meetings, all of a sudden, I believe the productivity will shoot up. The energy comes and you make the best decision. So I think it's, for me, what this has highlighted in the virtual calls that we have, the airtime's a little bit more equally spaced for the softer voices to be heard. And I think it's up to us to then really listen to those voices and then take those voices in our decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, there's a lot of talk around the words inclusivity and diversity. And I think they are lovely buzzwords and they are beautiful to feel. But if we don't actually listen to what people are saying, then we don't really move forward. And the only way to move forward is to have those more intimate conversations. I think, Mark, you brought up the idea of the practice of the huddle. Right now, this huddle is not like 16 people, it's like 8 people, and they're all different levels at work. And so suddenly the playing field is also leveled.
Yeah, one thing that we did in our organization through COVID was to absolutely break up the normal hierarchies, and we had everyone globally break down into groups of 8. And so someone that you would never interact with before down in a different level of hierarchy, and someone who was front-facing in office and back office, and someone who was at the end of their career, and someone who had just joined. We mixed them all up as much as possible. And, we had amazing things happen. We got to know one another. We, sometimes just talked about our anxieties. Sometimes people hopped on and played the violin, and people felt so much about bringing more of themselves to work. And it's just increased our collaboration. It's increased our community at work. And it's been a huge highlight for us as an organization.
Yeah. I know that, there is a certain amount of performance that kind of comes through when you're sitting in front of a Zoom panel, right? Now, Sachin, I know that you spent a long time in Japan, and we need to bring in some cultural reference here, because not every culture is comfortable in that particular sort of performance ideal here. So perhaps you could give us a little bit of your experience in Japan and bring that into the current conversation as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. And I think for those of you that are familiar with Japanese culture, there's so much positive about Japanese culture. And particularly when you go there as a visitor, you experience what is in many ways this perfect place, whether it's the service you receive, the food you've eaten, or just the Shinkansen, the bullet train ride that you've had, and how precise in terms of the clockwork that these trains run. All of that orchestration, in my mind, and I think the downside of Japanese culture is it creates this drive towards you have to be perfect as a person. And I think it's particularly true in the female side of Japan, even more so than it is on the male side, where there's maybe more tolerance for imperfections in males versus intolerance for females and imperfection. That desire to be perfect, and I think we can all imagine this on a day in, day out basis, can really create mental health challenges, can create stress at a level that can ultimately be unhealthy, not only for the individual, but for the population and for companies writ large there. And it's a very serious issue that I think is beginning to get proper and due recognition in Japan, both at the government level and at the corporate level, and certainly when we think about HR policies there. A long way to go, I'd say, because Like a lot of Asian cultures, mental health is a bit, I think Moira used the word taboo last week when we were having this conversation. And so it is kind of discussion under the table, and it needs to be much more on the table as a reality, and in this case, a cultural outgrowth. But what I'd say to kind of bring that experience into the current COVID, and hold on, my battery is running low and I've got to turn the power on. Apologies.
That's just how it is, Sachin. That's just how it is.
Yeah. So what I'd say is, I think when we think about what's happening right now, there's so much positives about what's come out of this, and Mark and Moira and James have talked about this, and how technology is really driving not only this major shift in how we interact and how we learn more about each other and the personal side of each other that we're now getting glimpses into on a daily basis. I think the downside to me that's been very evident with coronavirus is its impact, while uniform in that everybody is impacted by it, but its impact at the individual level is very unique. And there are a lot of people who would rather get back to work because the challenges of having kids at home from school or to be constantly in a small space and not being able to get the focus they need, or to have parents, elder care situations. There's a kind of a wide spectrum of real issues where the work environment was in many ways for people a way to balance that part of their life here. And we have to recognize that the impact is not equal. And I'd say for all of us here as panelists, we're probably thinking much more about the positives that have come out of this in terms of our own personal lives and work-life balance and in insights into relationships. But for a lot of people, it's not just that. And there's real trade-offs that they're making in the current situation. And so there is this, I think, important idea that Manulife has brought in, and I really commend the company around introducing the word equity into our D&I strategy, and we now actually call it DE&I, because equity is now equally important, not only because of the pandemic, but because of what's broadly been happening as well worldwide over the spring and into the early summer. But I think it's important to keep that in mind as we think about policies, that there's lots of good, and I think, James, you said it well, this is a progression, right? And we certainly don't want to go back to where we were, but I'm not sure staying where we are is necessarily the right answer either, right? Because we're on extremes on either side here, and getting to some balance so that for those of us that don't have as equal benefit from the pandemic can also benefit from some of this progressive change.
See, I'm the one unmuted because I'm listening so intently. That's a great segue actually for me, Sachin, to really talk about and to bring the diversity and inclusivity component into this conversation. To ask a couple of questions of all of you, which you're sort of answering, but we could expand on it now. Why are efforts more important now than they were 6 months ago? And what does it mean to you in terms of leadership? Sachin, you've just talked about how at Manulife this understanding that without equality, there's no diversity and no inclusion. And Moira, I know that you were talking about how it's no longer diversity and inclusion, but it's actually inclusion and diversity. And if you could please expand on that and the application.
So at Munich Re, we've recently just done a rebranding exercise around all of our people, talent activities. And so we were using diversity and inclusion. That was our global catchphrase and our regional. And we actually reversed it to put inclusion first. So inclusion and diversity. So for us, it's really about having an inclusive environment that then creates the diversity from an organisational perspective. And really about trying to work out what we needed to do as an organisation and what were the priorities. There were many things that we can and could do, but really what were our priorities from an organisation and what was important for us. And as it relates to the pandemic, I think, and it really does go back to communication and what our leaders have been doing, it's a bit about creating what we call stickiness and that connectivity. So how can we join together and what topics can we join together on? And it could be something that's more engagement and more fun, like virtual yoga. We've got some mindfulness sessions going out throughout the region at the moment. through to some pretty serious topics about what do we need to do in terms of some of our diversity statistics and how do we actually move forward as an organisation. So really, what are our challenges and how are we going to work together as a group to overcome them? But for us, it was subtle in terms of the change, but I think it was the right change at the right time. And it was really born about from the pandemic. I'm not sure we would have thought about it otherwise. I think we probably would have stayed the same. So subtle, but I think will have profound influence and effect, I think, as we move forward as an organisation.
Well, I'm just going to expand the question because I've got you on screen right there. You have enormous remit as a HR leader all the way from Africa to Australia, New Zealand. How did you see leaders beginning to engage? You know, this is diversity in action. So how did you actually begin to see people engage despite all the remote working?
Yeah, so 19 countries. We've recently just celebrated last month International Women's Month in South Africa, which was a massively positive experience for us as an organisation. As it relates to the leaders, I think all of our leaders have stepped up, but they've done it in their own way. So it's not for me or my people in the HR function to dictate how we do it or what we do. It's about giving some of our leaders the tools and some of the thought leadership around what other organisations are doing, what other industries are doing, and therefore what they can do. But on a practical level, we've got CEOs taking the time to call people personally, probably people in the office that they may not have actually spoken to. The communication has increased dramatically, whether it's MS Teams, whether it's email. The town hall frequency has increased, but there's also been a lot of smaller type huddle pieces like what Mark talked about. And actually in that communication, a focus on the personal before you move to the professional. And I think we're all guilty of walking into a meeting in the office and just getting down to business. I think the difference for us and our leaders is that we're taking the time at the start or at the end of a call or a webinar or whatever's going on to actually maybe learn a little bit more. As you've said, that the personal piece has come into play numerous times. We've got babies on knees, we've got dogs. The dog thing is huge in my side of the world, and everybody's got an animal or a pet that they want to show everybody else on screen. So lots of babies and lots of pets being shown. And I would never have known, any of that about us and the people that we work for. So maybe we need to bring the animals and the pets into the office and do all of that sort of stuff too. That might be something groundbreaking for us as we move forward as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what it is the boundaries and the barriers have just dropped, haven't they? We can't hold on to these things anymore. And I think that's what great crisis is. And I use the word great with inverted commas because it's not the same for everyone, but it really forces us to rethink the way that we have lived and the way that we have worked. And these things are really not separate. Now, James, I know that you had, been very direct with saying that you're new to how to empower inclusion and diversity, and you're still learning. And I think that's, first of all, very humble and a brilliant thing to be able to say rather than just to go blindly. So could I just ask how you are beginning to work on it? And this is a new role for you as well, isn't it?
Right, yeah. Thank you, Anita. Yeah, I took this, the new role of the Principal Officer and CEO since the beginning of 2020, right in line with the COVID introduction. So it was a good induction for me, similar to Sachin in his new position in Manulife. Yeah, I mean, here at Munich Re, I'm used to being surrounded by doctors all around me. If you look at our board, our executive, they're just full of doctors. Not many can help me from a medical perspective. We have, I think, only one or two medical doctors here, which I try to consult. But clearly, there are a lot of brain power and intelligence in our industry. And not just at Munich Re, of course. And I think it's very easy to be caught up in internal projects to occupy our times, to make presentations or reports or market research. The strategy needs to be revised. That can easily occupy our times, and it looks good because you have an output at the end. I think my learning here is clearly that's not really leadership, right? That's more management and maybe getting the hygiene of the right business setup. And I think here, when we talk about being a leader and leading with the front foot and so on, I mean, it's very encouraging that more or less as the leaders have been doing well. So I feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders now. But what I would say is a key word that I would associate is empathy. I think a lot of the great papers and research and documents that come out, if you don't get to your own team at the right level, because you need to know where they are from an emotional level. And indeed, that goes out to our clients, because if you ring a client who are in a very fresh lockdown and they go through their stresses and say, by the way, I have a new business product idea, you're not going to connect. And I think that just highlights that it's the empathy that's a key thing. And I think this is a journey for me, right? I wish there's a course where I do it over a year or so and then I'm empathetic, and that's not the case, clearly. So I think that's why I think it's a learning for me. And of course, being in a new role, not just because of an executive role, you get confronted with different situations. And it's very easy to jump into solution mode, or this is what we do from our work from home, or this is a new strategy. And I think it's really important then for me to take a deep breath and step back and say, look, what's the ultimate aim, and what's the team? And I think that the key word I would say is it can be done, the decisions can be done in a little bit more silo way. But to execute it and to really live through whatever the smart decision is, you need everyone's buy-in. You need the inclusion. And for that, it's much more powerful to have that empathy from the beginning as you make these decisions, so that when you roll out something, you have the buy-in from your community or from your clients. So for me, that's why I think it's a humbling experience, because I'm surrounded by very good people around me, and I'm picking up little traits here and there. And I would hope as a self-assessment that I'm becoming a little bit more empathetic, and I certainly wouldn't say I'm there yet, but that's why I think it's a journey for us.
I think you said the magic word, self-assessment. I think in all corporations, leadership has to have a self-assessment, and a deep one. And I think we can all agree from what I'm hearing everybody say today, that inclusive leadership is about fairness, respect, creating value and belonging, but it's also about listening, and it's also about being humble and giving people voice that you may not have realized didn't have a voice before. And that really is what diversity is. And that's what inclusivity is. It's respect too. It all comes together in one package. And it's not just a strategy, it's real life. And perhaps that's what's happening, is that we're bringing what is happening in our personal lives and the way that we negotiate those things into the corporate world. And that sets the stage for, I think, to retain a sense of curiosity as we actually start to build new things into our corporations and into our communities, because it's not just work. It's not just people who came to work. These are your communities now, and you know them. You know their dogs. I know that I probably have, because I'm getting messages to say final poll time. So I'm going to tell my beautiful producer to put final poll into there. At the same time, that poll is very relevant to where I'm going to go with this here. I want to talk about, and this has been a really big topic. And at any given time, the words mental and wellness are everywhere, because this is the time that has brought it out in either the way that we are coping or not coping, and what that really looks like. And did we miss that in our companies, in our spaces, in the way that we were working? I want to talk about, what does physical and emotional health look like in an office? How was it before, and how do you perceive it changing? And how specifically can an employer support employees in the offices as well as in their homes? Because it's not just one, it's either or, depending on what your companies actually choose. Moira, could I begin with you?
Oh, I'm still having tricks with that little mute button. Okay, I think for us, I guess futuristically, I think we've done a lot throughout the pandemic in terms of raising awareness, noting, as Sachin said, that in our remit and in our region, we have different levels of evolution around the topic of both physical and mental health. So in terms of the embracing this as a topic, and we need to be culturally sensitive, I think, to that first and foremost, but at the same time try to push the agenda forward as much as we can. So lots of work in this space, lots of surveys, lots of asking staff what's important to them, what's really irritating them, upsetting them, disabling them at the moment. So we're getting great feedback, and our staff have been really, really receptive to participate, which I view really positively as well. So given the nature of where we are, I think it's about, again, it's that inclusivity, right? So the survey results for me the participation and the honesty that people will give us enable us, I think, to drive the future agenda. As an organisation, we're about to embrace the WHO World Health Mental Day, which will take place on the 10th of October. So we're going for a big sort of play on this in terms of October. Again, some of our countries like Australia, pretty advanced. Are You OK has been a big campaign out there for a number of years, but we've got other countries that are just new to this space. So we're going out again with some education, with some articles, with some videos, using what's out there and what other people are using as much as we can as an organisation. But I think ideally the aspiration is to make sure that we are okay and that we're actually having the conversation, and that if we're not okay, we know where we can get tools and who we can speak to about being okay. So I think for us, October, we're nearly there. Big lift off in terms of embracing October as a month. And again, at first and now trying to get our leadership educated and ready so that they're ready for the next type of conversations that we want to have throughout October. You're on mute, Anita.
Anita, you're on mute.
It has to be somebody, and it has to be me. I said to them before we got online, I bet you at one point in time it's going to be me that's muted, of course. What I wanted to say was that, I like what you're saying about preparation, because I think in the past there's a lot of these big leaps forward, but we can't run and fly with a new set of circumstances before we actually ground ourselves in the reality of it. There's just one other little thing I'd like you to just touch on, because you mentioned this before about mentorship and sponsorship and how this can actually really affect a lot of the younger team members because they don't really have the tools now. How do you actually build your networks? And that can actually have an impact on mental health too.
I have to admit, we're talking. We haven't actually really moved to decisive action in that space. I think we're going to have to. And we're all in a little bit of a wait and see mode. There's denial around how long the pandemic will go on, how long we'll be in this work environment. There's clearly fatigue, there's burnout. There's all sorts of things going on simultaneously. But for me now, I think it's time to adjust the dial and start to have those conversations about what we are going to do, particularly for, I think, the younger members and the new members of staff too. So we've got Sachin who's just joined a new organisation. So all of these people who are virtually onboarding this year, I mean, they have performed and just amazing. I think I couldn't even comprehend, joining 3 years ago in an onboarding type fashion. But I think we now need to start to shift to different focus groups and different types of employees and start to work out where we need to do a little bit more and where we need to do it a little bit differently. But I don't have the answer. I think it's something that we're just going to have to start to focus on, and it's a conversation that needs to start to happen as we head towards the end of the year.
Okay. I'm pushing my luck. I'm going to ask one more question, and it's kind of split between Sachin and James, because Sachin, you talked about never ever meeting your team. And James, I know that reinsurance is heavily relationship driven. So if I could start with James, just very quickly, before I get another message that tells me to hurry up, how are your teams actually staying close to clients? And for Sachin, how are you staying close to your teams? So, James, if you could start first.
Yeah, thank you. A great question. I think this is a new normal, right? And therefore, it is going to be a lot of trial and error on what is the right mix and so on. We are definitely in people business as a reinsurer or insurance at the end of the day. And I think you need to create some new habits here. And the habit of reaching out. I think email, it doesn't cut it anymore. We used to combine email with physical meeting and it doesn't cut it anymore. So I think it's the frequency of staying in touch with these colleagues sitting outside Singapore. A lot of the business is for Munich Re is also sitting abroad from Singapore, right, across Southeast Asia and all of Asia. So from that perspective, we really also focus on the frequency of it as well. And it's not to call them every day, how you going, right? So you have to find the right medium. And it is a little bit not so much, I think in Asia, we also talk about matching hierarchies, right? CEOs with CEOs at a certain level. We try to break that down a little bit more and really try to understand what will be their potential need, at least from a work perspective. We can't always try to get it from their personal need. I mean, if we can get to that, I think that will be very powerful. And that's not something that's easily available from a data perspective unless you're very lucky to have those personal connections. So we try to also forecast a little bit what would be the potential need in the current environment and try to start the conversation from that perspective. And I wouldn't call it a selling technique, but it's more to understand what their need is and then keep the conversation going. And I think, like Sachin as well, we have a lot of new employees that start with us, and they sort of say, "How do I do that?" They don't have the contact. I don't have a phone number or a WhatsApp number to reach out. And I think here, for us, many of us work for companies, right? And you need to use a team. And I think it cannot be that you're reaching out to that one person. You need to really put the company head on and keep that frequency of discussion. And you need to stay away from that. And I think, again, it's coming back to empathy. When do you push a certain presentation, or when do you talk about personal topic and just hang up, right? And I think this is something where you need to be very flexible and comfortable with yourself to have these regular, I would say, dialogue. And in Munich Re, we also have this slogan of continuous conversation. And this is more towards people, sort of within internal discussion, but I think that's equally applicable in the outside market as well, to have that continuous conversation, not like pitch after pitch or a quarter after quarter call. So I think that'll be my approach here. I think we are still learning, like I said, so I wouldn't say that's a silver bullet, but it's a bit of going back to the old way to connect to your customers or to your clients.
Thanks very much, James. Sachin?
But, I think James hit it on the head in terms of my own experience. And for me, it's all virtual. I have yet to meet any of my country CEOs and their teams in a live setting, but a lot of virtualness, one-on-ones, small group or huddle type meetings with the management teams, town halls with everybody, 400 or 500 people dialing in, very similar to this type of event type fashion with Q&A in a very live format. Business reviews, deep dive sessions, and I'd call it, it's been where normally I'd go physically to some place for 5 days and you park yourself there and you just go through it with everybody, both internally and externally with customers. Here it's much more iterative and it's a peeling of the onion, and you're building that relationship in a very iterative fashion versus in sort of, episodic type events when travel was there. And I'd actually say there's a lot to learn from this that I want to carry forward, because the frequency point and the empathy point is really important. I think my most powerful interactions with my GMs has been when I've just said, "How's it going?" on WhatsApp. What do you need? How can I help? It's been the most powerful set of conversations that I've had with each of the, and I try to do that now at least once or twice a week. Just ask that question, because it creates that conversation, it creates that insight, and it creates a connection of, look, you're not alone, right? And I think it really relates to the polling that we just did, where the biggest fear that people seem to have is feeling isolated, right, from the rest of the company here. And a lot of senior leadership roles to begin with, particularly if you're a CEO or GM, they're lonely jobs to begin with. And at times you feel like you're in a fishbowl, and yet your biggest device is self-awareness, right? It's one of these very, very challenging roles at times. And so it's a long way of saying having that frequency, treating this as a continuous conversation or peeling the onion, and giving people their preferred method. I don't care if it's WhatsApp, iMessage, FaceTime, phone call, Teams, Zoom, doesn't matter to me. Pick your device, and I don't really care what time it is either. Other than when I'm sleeping, I'm available. And it really just gives people, it kind of unshackles the opportunities in terms of how people should communicate. And that's sort of really what's required, I think, right now to make it work in a world where we can't get face-to-face. And I'm one for, I definitely don't think we're going back to where we were, but I also do believe that there is an absolute need for travel and an absolute need for a work environment, and particularly for the populations like our younger employees who gain so much from watching people above them operate. And that is absolutely lost right now. It's very hard to bring that back through a virtual mechanism.
Yeah, I think it's a combination really of the audio and the visual. I know for me in my own work, what's really worked very well is to pick up the phone, to have a conversation, to hear a voice at the other end. That has an immediate connectivity, and it really beats 20 lines of a WhatsApp text. You can just have one conversation, and it's 5 minutes, and you get so much more done. And you actually have, you can hear the warmth and feel it. Of course, especially because there's so much fatigue being online as well. Mark, I'm going to ask you to kind of bring it home because you're working with culture and you're working to empower, all communities to understand and be empowered by that culture. So, what is the sort of advice for sort of the top skills? I mean, we've mentioned a lot of them, but I just want you to bring it home that you see as key for success factors in this new reality, both as an employee and as an employer.
Thank you so much. I think, the big thing for me, and if I was to offer any words of advice, is how much you can create psychological safety for people around you. And that's whether it's a team member, a colleague, a boss. But I don't think we thought about it enough beforehand. I think people were really squishing themselves into boxes and trying to behave a certain way. And let's not lose this momentum. It sort of ripped a Band-Aid off that has an opportunity for us to be able to heal and grow in new ways and create communities at work where people enjoy work, bring their whole selves to work, and allowing people as a leader, and that's your own personal leadership, is your leadership is just creating that atmosphere of, you heard it from everyone on this panel, trust and empathy and an ability to be able to, just help one another. And so my closing word would be, wake up in the morning, who needs my help? And if you do that regularly, you're going to create a more inclusive world.
That's absolutely brilliant. I'm going to give you guys a piece of advice because I think as leaders, people have a tendency to take on a lot and take on all the worries and all the troubles and all the problems. And that's really your role, isn't it? But to also take care of yourselves, because I think this time has made us understand that we're not going to be of use to anybody if we're not able to actually take care of ourselves. We've got to walk the talk too. As much as we are talking about inclusivity and diversity on a corporate and in an office and on a grand scale, if we're not inclusive and diverse with ourselves and take care of those things, then we're not going to be able to actually carry out any of these beautiful things that have come as a result of this crisis. And actually, just what you were saying, Mark, if we all look at the whole, biggest worry for your future at work is feeling isolated from my employer and colleagues. I think we have to actually remember that not everybody really wants to be on their own. Some people need to have that connectivity. And now with this, whether it's going to be 1.5 days or it's going to be 2 days or 3 days, I can tell you from my point of view, I've been a solopreneur for 15 years, and I absolutely love being on my own at home. And actually, it was me going out to work for 1.5 or 2 days and then coming back. And so, for me, it's absolutely ideal, but it's not the same thing for everybody. And there are so many people who feel so disconnected. And I think that's the main thing that we're talking about here as we talk about the policies going forward, is how do we connect everybody in a meaningful way that is not just words and that is not just a policy, but it's actual reality. Oh, it's been a fantastic conversation. I'm going to open the floor to Q&A, which means I probably have to look at this little pop-down menu and see if I'm sure we've got tons of questions. Let you guys have a little drink of water as well. All right, we have great questions here. All right. The first one was, are we not supposed to start the session at 10? Abhinav, I hope that we haven't failed you. And I hope that it's been great. They couldn't hear us. All right, here we go. Hi, is there any difference between, you can all see the questions as well, between new normal and before COVID-19 for D&I? So we're talking about D&I, but why are we differentiating it by having said new normal? Who wants to take that question? So diversity and inclusivity.
Yeah, I don't.
More, go for it.
Yeah, I don't think it's a new normal. I think the reality is it's just the events that we have been through and that we're still living through has put focus. So new normal is a bit of a buzzword, new way of working. I think actually around this topic, it's actually to put it to the forefront. So, and I think being able to embrace it more and think about it more by virtue of the experiences that we've actually been living through, which I think is good news, because I do think we were starting to get a little bit lazy potentially, or we're focused on so many different things. So I think we need to be careful with the word new. I think it's a bit of a buzzword, but I think for me it's about focus and it's about emphasis. but it's because of what we've gone through that's got us where we are now, which is good. It's good for diving, good for our industry, good for everybody.
Moira, I just add on to that. For me, a new normal, I take that if I interpret that, or I take it as the next phase, right, after COVID, and if we will get there. I think for the D&I topic, every year this will become a bigger topic. This is not something that you prioritize against business objectives. This is, to me, a basic value that we need to live. And this will just get bigger and bigger. I'm not sure if I'm doing a last-minute comparison, but it's a bit like climate change. It's coming, and this will get bigger and bigger, and we'll feel it more. And therefore, I think under new normal, yeah, it can be a bigger thing. Now, I don't know what the next one is. Hopefully, we come to a bit more of a stability in this world. But even though the stability comes, I believe the D&I topic is a growing force, and it cannot be then saying, okay, now we solved it. I don't think we'll get to that in any time soon. So that'll be my response.
Absolutely agree with you. Sachin,
What
do you want
I'd add on that too. Oh, sorry. No, what I was going to add on that, I think the other piece that's important, and maybe why a new normal may be a way to characterize it, is that I think the pandemic has really highlighted that while we may have been driving towards equality, we have not created equity. And I think this is really important because there's vast cuts of the population, particularly across Southeast Asia or South Asia, that the impact to them is certainly a lot more negative. And when you look out, while some of us are thinking about the rebound here or how economic activity is going to pick up, for a lot of the population, it's a long way away. And so I think that's the other side of this, that it's highlighted that despite our best intentions with D&I, despite our desires for equality, it hasn't led to equity. And that, I think, is really a lot of what we're seeing around the world, in fact. And the pandemic, to me, has just underscored that we have a lot more to do to get to equity, even though our intent may be equality, the output's not there yet.
Absolutely. I think, the trouble with buzzwords, and every crisis or every era has its buzzwords. We've got the new normal, we've got pivoting. Well, what on earth does it actually mean in reality? And are we actually looking at all the components that will get us there? So really good points that both James and Sachin and Mark that you've made. Mark, anything to add to that?
That unmute button takes a while, doesn't it? No,
Yes.
I think my panelists have answered that perfectly well, so nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. We have somebody who's also starting their day at 4 a.m. It's Belhassan Tonat. Greetings from Johannesburg. Diversity is also where the workplace does reflect the composition of the population. That means age, gender, race, ethnicity, background. What is the financial industry doing to achieve this? And I think we talk a lot about youth, but I think that there should also be talk about, if we're going to talk about inclusivity and diversity, we need to talk about age as well, because there's a lot of emphasis on how do we attract the young, but we also have older players in the market. So how are we going to keep this balance? Who would like to take that? I think, Moira, you had something to say about that before.
Yeah, so I think we as an organisation are focused, when I talked about priorities earlier, not all of our countries, but collectively around the gender space in terms of equality, and as it relates to different ages, different age groups, and different things that we need. The focus for us has actually been on getting more young people into the organisation because we are an ageing population. And so I think the insurance industry as a whole has to look to itself towards how we attract younger and more diverse talent into our organisations. But you're right, Anita, I think we can't lose sight of the fact that we also need to think about how we re-skill and we look towards our more mature players and how they also add a huge amount to the organisation. And for me, I think the emphasis there would be about creating more mobility. So the pandemic stopped some of our mobility, but actually organisationally, I think it's how we use people in our organisation who have the maturity, who have got the experience, who have done the years, how we can actually use them more to help us, particularly with the new and the younger staff. So for me, I think that's an emphasis. So more mobility all round, but definitely with our more experienced workers who potentially have had some of those issues that you have when you've got the family and you're raising everybody, etc. So you're now over at the other side and you're now saying, what do I need to do and can I give more back to the organisation? So for me, I think that's a definite focus as we move forward, notwithstanding the first two probably take priority.
Sure. And Sachin, how do you see that actually panning out as a we're talking a lot about our hopes and dreams and our wishes. You know, how does this actually feel in actuality? Where, what do you see your company having done, and what are the plans for the future as well?
Look, I think like anything that requires sort of a quantum leap in how companies are operating, and recognizing first and foremost that despite our efforts, the outcome is not where it needs to be. And so stepping back and really rethinking how we're getting at this. And I'd say for us here at Manulife, and I'll say very clearly, still learning, but from what I've seen, there's tremendous focus around DE&I in the company. There's very hard steps we're taking, particularly around the equity piece and evaluating everything we're doing from a perspective of employment and gender and age and ethnicity and race, around fair treatment, fair access, fair opportunity, and advancement for everyone. And there's a lot of deliberate top-down process. It starts with our Group CEO, Roy Gorey, chairing the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee himself here and driving it. So there is, like any other big change effort, you've got to, one, make sure that leadership is role modeling the behavior, first and foremost. Secondly, it's got to get measured, right? I mean, these are, at the end of the day, if we're looking to get outcomes to be different, we've got to be measuring where we are today, and we've got to be setting milestones for it. And certainly at Manulife, we clearly have those milestones and measures and metrics and are very much on that. So it's, to me, no different than a change effort. But I think what's really happened worldwide, and I certainly think at Manulife over the last 6 months, is a recognition that despite all of our efforts and best intentions as companies, we've not moved fast enough, far enough with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that we really need to step back and rethink what we're doing and put a lot more accelerator behind it. So I think it's really the start of that journey, because companies have been balancing dealing with the pandemic and sort of getting through it, with the recognition coming out of the pandemic that we haven't made progress on this very important issue, both as corporates, but then our role in society, because it's really society that's, if you will, telling us you haven't done enough here. And there's plenty of demonstrations over the last 6 months to show that.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, this idea of milestones, measures, and metrics has to be applied to everybody equally. Otherwise, it becomes a very unequal field. You know, if you're applying one set of metrics to your upper corporate and then another set of metrics to everybody else, well, then your equality and your diversity is never going to actually pan out. So it's really good to see that, you know, from listening to all of you speak, that, you know, you are all leaders of empathy and trust and curiosity, humility, and commitment, and you're all ready to you're already in the quantum leap. And I love that, because we are in a major quantum leap time, and we don't want to leap over all the important bits and pieces that go into creating these foundations and digging out the stuff that needs to be dug out and dealt with. Because if we don't, and that takes listening, right, then humility comes into that play. I mean, there's a lovely little comment here, James, from Christina Ang, who says she appreciates your humility and your authenticity. You even took a second to breathe when you talked about taking a step back instead of solutioning. So kudos to you. I have one last question, and I know I'm really pushing it today, but hey, this is a great conversation. I hope you guys have been enjoying also and feeling the connection, and everybody else who's been actually watching us. Robin says, maybe it is over worrying things, but if things turn more digital and virtual as a future of work, do we see cyber as a possible future pandemic to be wary about? Who wants to take that question?
I'll certainly start. You know, I certainly think yes is the short answer, but what I'd say is that cybersecurity, particularly for the financial services industry, is not a new issue or a new threat. And it's been one that's been out there and in growing challenge for the financial services industry for quite some time. And I think the shift that we're seeing over the last 6 months only heightens the need to have much, much stronger focus on cybersecurity. And I certainly know in not only within Manulife, but in talking to peer peers across the industry, this is a very, very big focus. It doesn't get the airtime in these types of settings, and maybe appropriately, because I think it's important that this is done in a way where you don't put too much fanfare on it, because the whole idea of it is to be secure, but not to tell people you're secure in this regard. So it's an absolutely important issue. And it also has a lot to do with location strategies and which geographies companies ultimately base their operations, house their data here. And that, unfortunately, has taken on geopolitical undertones as well this year. So it is one that I think most companies, I'd say, and MAS in particular, has guidelines around how they expect companies to stress test against cyber threats and cyber attacks here, as most regulators do, in an area where I think we can never do enough. And it is a growing future pandemic, as you said, a digital pandemic.
Thank you very much, Sachin.
Can I
Yes,
add
James.
a note on that?
James, you can absolutely add a note to it, because we're already 15 minutes past the mark, and no one's cut us off yet. So this is great. I love it.
Yeah, I think when it comes to this topic, it's a very dear topic to Munich Re, and I would say I would enter the full representation, but maybe just some higher take here. First of all, there are similarities to pandemic to cyber in that they're both systemic risks. This pandemic, whilst it's a tragedy from a number of lives lost, people affected, split families, and the list goes on. But again, maybe this is not the pandemic, right? Because we had a equity market where it recovered relatively quick here on this basis. For the cyber as well, I mean, if we talk about the number of cyber attacks, this is numbers in thousands, if not tens of thousands. And therefore, we didn't have the cyber attack yet. And here we're talking also about critical infrastructures. And the other similarity is that these are both covers that in the capital market simply can't absorb. So if we have a global pandemic shutdown or global cyber, it's not that insurance has a solution here. But I think what it does raise is the awareness. Like the side benefit here, we are simply more aware of the hygiene that we need to occupy to ourselves for the benefit of our family and our employees. But when it comes to cyber, it's quite similar. And the cyber world can be more complicated as well. But I think it's the, first of all, you go through the phases of recognition, awareness, and inquiry. And I think what this has highlighted is that we've fast-tracked into the inquiry mode straight away. I think the recognition is there, and people are aware about the pandemic and the cyber risk, and it's now in this inquiry mode. And this can be the most frustrating mode, because the more questions that you put up, there's more questions coming, not more answers. And from that perspective, I think it is more that you need to sit down and really assess whether your company has BCP plans or business plans that can overcome these situations. And I think from that perspective, it's not just can we just get insurance on our protection, it goes much more beyond that. And in here, we again come back to, I think, Mark, you mentioned that this psychological safety net. And one thing that I had a discussion on some of the peers here is that, we saw this pandemic effect, COVID-19 impact, where FI industry, financial industry had stood relatively solid. We could all work from home digitally. But if you look at the SME segments of F&B business, retail business, travel business, they're going through the most difficult times at the moment, and they had to shut down the layoffs. And this is probably still coming. I don't know where the end date of this one is. Now, someone said, what happens if it's a cyber? Because then the F&B business might still continue. You can go out to restaurants even though there's a cyber attack, but the FI industry might be going through a bit of a shutdown. So this scenario thinking has simply put on a bit more bolder highlight on it. And I think as an industry, we're going through the inquiry phase here. So that's what I would say in terms of similarities, but also the differences between a systemic risk like a pandemic to a cyber risk.
Thank you very much, James.
And the big one is still coming, I believe. The big one is still out there, right? The more scarier pandemic or the scarier cyber. And these are becoming now no longer a tail risk. It's becoming more closer to reality.
Thank you very much, James, for sobering but actual thoughts of where we all are, actually. And, the 4 words that you used, I feel kind of also sum up really diversity and inclusion, or inclusion and diversity and respect, which is recognition, awareness, inquiry and then solutions, because you can't just go from recognition to solutions. It's impossible. If you miss out the middle bit, then we've really missed out a very crucial time of our lives in which we can actually go so much deeper, become more responsible and be much more aware and to listen. And that's how we're actually going to move all of this forward. I think we can all agree that we don't have the answers to everything, but we're willing to find them. And we're willing in a way that we were maybe not even aware of how less willing we might have been before and how willing we really are right now. You guys are amazing. I've had a wonderful time. I just want to have just maybe a closing remark from each of you. If I could begin with you, Mark. Don't forget to unmute.
There we go. It's been a very reflective session, so thank you very much. I think my closing remark would be to be an example to everyone that you meet. So whether it be work or home, create a space whereby you allow people to bring more of themselves. And if you give that to people, you automatically get it back. And so I just strongly encourage you to increase your circle and increase your openness, because I think as human beings, that's when solutions happen.
Thank you very much, Mark. Moira?
I would say look after yourself completely as we head towards, this focus next month for us globally in terms of our mental health. So look after yourself first and foremost.
Thank you very much. Sachin?
I think recognizing the impact is not even or equal of what's happening here, and being sensitive to that, and not looking at the situation through your own lens, but really trying to look at it through the lens of the individuals that you're interacting with.
Thank you. And James?
Yeah, I would say this is definitely a journey, and the journey starts with you, with everyone. So consider this and go through the inquiry phase, and also I hope that you have the right safety net and the right listener to speak your voice up on this very important topic.
Thank you
With
all.
you on the journey. Yeah.
Thank you very much. For me, equality and inclusivity is agency, and agency is all of the things that you've spoken about, from checking in on yourselves to the checking in on others with mental health, to understanding that not all homes are equal, that not all access to technology is equal. And when we actually use that as a basis point, then we will actually develop our companies and our philosophies and our communities and our policies in a way that is automatically emotionally intelligent and therefore equal, and of course inclusive. You guys have been amazing. It has been an absolute honor to be your facilitator this morning. Everybody unmute. Thank you all for being with me this morning on Dive In. It's been an absolute pleasure. We are a group of 5, so in Singapore that's a legal gathering in times of COVID. So when everybody actually does get back and are here, we've all got to meet in real time, because that's what this is about. It is about connecting and understanding. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody who's been with us. We had 90-something participants, and we had some great questions as well. And thank you also to the wonderful person who has been helping us with all the tech as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.